Welcome to my YouTube channel. On this occasion, we explore the enigma of Kolatsyakal. In February 1959, 9 experts abandoned their shelter on the Mountain of the Dead. Why would they flee towards an icy death? The Soviet archives only keep absolute silence regarding such a historical mystery. Let's begin with today's great story.
Those young people represented the technical promise of the Soviet Union. They were minds forged at the Ural Polytechnic Institute amidst blueprints and rigorous calculations. Igor Dyatlov was not only a natural leader with charisma, he possessed an exceptional talent for radio engineering and logistical planning. The group combined the vitality of students with the precision of the most experienced graduates. Their main objective was to achieve the demanding Grade 3 certification. This was the highest recognition for elite mountaineers at that time. Such a distinction required physical and mental endurance far superior to the average. The recovered diaries show no trace of panic or improvisation. They only reflect absolute discipline and a friendship forged in previous expeditions. Fate intervened providentially to save Yuri Yudin. A sudden physical ailment separated him from his companions at the beginning of the winter route. His bitter departure left the group with 9 final members marching into the unknown. They were experts with technical equipment facing an environment they believed they mastered perfectly. What invisible force could have subdued such intellects in a single night? They were veterans facing their end. After leaving Vijay, the last vestige of civilization, the group ventured into the white immensity. The 35mm film reels recovered by researchers act today as fragments of a reality suspended in time. Each photograph reveals an impeccable expedition, capturing moments of effort and camaraderie under the Ural sky. The personal diaries, written with firm calligraphy, confirm absolute normality until February 1st, 1959. On that definitive date, the mountaineers made a decision that still baffles analysts. Instead of descending 1.5 kilometers towards the natural forest shelter, they preferred to camp on the exposed hillside. Did they wish to test their endurance in extreme conditions? The final entries describe a glacial wind and a shared dinner in the canvas's gloom. One of the last images shows the young people vigorously digging in the snow, unaware that they were preparing their own shelter. If you observe those developed negatives, you will notice the confidence of those who felt masters of their destiny, unaware that the mountain had already sentenced them to death. In late February 1959, the icy silence of the mountainside was finally broken by Mikhail Sharavin's discovery. The tent, half buried by snow, stood as a macabre monument to the disaster. Upon approaching, the rescuers found no signs of external aggression, but rather a detail that chilled the blood of those present. Forensic analysis would later confirm that the canvas had been violently slashed from the inside with a knife. The cuts, precise and desperate, suggested an immediate need for escape. Inside that torn refuge, the scene defied any logic of professional survival. Knives and axes remained in their place. Most disturbingly, heavy boots and coats were also there. What absolute terror could have driven them? Why flee barefoot into a night of lethal cold? Outside, a row of ghostly footprints led away from the camp. There were traces of bare feet or feet protected only by socks, descending in formation towards the forest, a considerable distance away. There were no signs of a chaotic flight, but rather a rhythmic, deliberate, and somber march towards the darkness of the pines. That torn sanctuary was the first and terrible vestige of a tragedy that the mountain refused to fully reveal. 1.5 kilometers from the tent, under an ancient cedar, rescuers found 2 young men. They lay next to a makeshift bonfire with burned hands. Could the cold have been so intense that they didn't feel the fire? The tree branches were broken up to 5 meters high. Those explorers sought shelter or clear view from the heights amidst the blizzard. Igor Dyatlov and 2 other companions appeared between the cedar and the camp. Their bodies were aligned towards the summit at regular intervals. They seemed to have died while crawling in agony back to the tent. Their faces showed a frosty determination under the harsh sky of the Urals. Dr. Boris Vozrosteny determined that hypothermia was the official cause of their tragic ultimate end. However, something didn't fit. The color of their skin showed an unusual orange hue. They were brilliant minds overcome by an element that left no trace of struggle. Only an eternal silence remained, and suspicions that initial forensic science could not silence even today, while the whole world watched with absolute horror and a deep, frosty, growing unease. The arrival of May 1959 brought with it the thaw and an even more terrifying truth. Buried under 4 meters of compact snow, searchers found the last remaining expeditionaries at the bottom of a ravine. The scene suggested a desperate refuge that ended up becoming a frigid tomb. However, subsequent forensic examinations shattered any attempt at a rational explanation for what was discovered there. The bodies of Dubinina and her companion showed massive chest traumas. Their ribs were broken with unusual violence, while the third youth showed a deep cranial fracture. Dr. Vozrosteny compared the magnitude of these injuries to the force of a high-speed car impact. The most disturbing aspect was the total absence of damage to the external soft tissues. There were no bruises or signs of struggle to justify such internal destruction. How were their bones broken without tearing the skin? That invisible force left no traces on the surface, but it crushed the very structure of their bodies. These traumatic revelations stripped the case of its veneer of natural accident. You are no longer facing a simple flight into the extreme cold of the Urals. You now face an enigma of pure physical violence that Soviet science could not understand or explain even today. After the findings in the ravine, the machinery of the Soviet state imposed a leaden silence. Prosecutor Lev Ivanov received the order to close the file in May 1959. What hidden pressures dictated the abrupt end of the search? The official conclusion was as poetic as it was evasive. The young people succumbed to a spontaneous force of nature that they could not overcome. This vague verdict buried the truth under the weight of bureaucracy. The files were classified as state secrets and sent to guarded basements. For decades, access to the evidence was a forbidden privilege. Current investigators denounce suspicious gaps in the original pagination. Reports are missing regarding the radiation levels found in the victim's clothing. A critical question arises. Why conduct nuclear tests on civilian hikers? The trace of radiation vanished amidst redactions and torn pages. In the midst of the Cold War, transparency was a weakness that the Kremlin could not afford. The Dyatlov case ceased to be a human tragedy to transform into an uncomfortable secret. The Iron Curtain fell over the Urals, sealing the fate of those souls with the cold rigor of ink and the darkest state censorship of those iron times. 60 years later, the rigor of modern science seems to have deciphered the historical enigma that Soviet censorship tried to bury. A 2021 scientific report published in the renowned Nature Communications proposes an explanation stripped of myths, a delayed slab avalanche. By excavating the slope to pitch their tent, the mountaineers possibly weakened the structure of the snowpack. For hours, incessant katabatic winds, gelid currents descending the inclement mountain, accumulated tons of snow over the shelter. The weight became deadly until a compact block of hard snow slid over them. This precise impact explains the violence of the internal fractures, similar to a devastating crash, but without leaving external marks. The pressure was massive, uniform, and crushed bones without tearing the skin. One might ask, was this the invisible terror that forced them to rip the canvas? Physics suggests that they were not fleeing a monster, but a snow trap they themselves had activated. This revelation transforms the human tragedy into a totally absolute irony. Their own technical expertise in preparing the camp was what sealed their own final fate on the icy slope of the Urals. Years after the official closure, prosecutor Levinov broke his own silence. He confessed that several witnesses reported incandescent orbs flying over the Urals that night. These lights were not myths, but documented phenomena that the state decided to ignore. You must understand that the area was not a simple ice desert. Very close by, the Polyorny Ural Testing Center operated. In 1959, colossal R-7 missiles performed experimental flights following routes that crossed precisely that latitude. Were they accidental witnesses to a technological failure in the Cold War? The presence of radiation on Dubinina's clothing reinforces this dark suspicion. This invisible trace does not fit with a simple avalanche or a natural accident. It suggests direct contact with particles detached from experimental engines or high-altitude tests. The panic in the tent could have originated from a supersonic boom or toxic chemical vapors. Those young experts perhaps saw something that the Kremlin yearned to preserve under the cloak of absolute shadow. They became collateral victims of a relentless military machine that allowed no witnesses on its own path towards outer space. Beyond the myth, we remember the 9 from the Ural Polytechnic Institute as pioneering souls, not as mere names in a chronicle of horror. By definitively sealing these files, their courage still resonates in the icy peaks. If you seek historical rigor in the abysses of the past, subscribe and leave us your reflection in the comments. Thank you for deciphering with us the fragments of this human tragedy. May their memory always prevail over the enigma of the Dead Mountain.